everybody. This is Glenn Livingston. I'm here with Dr. Janice Stefanacci. Hi, Janice.
Hi, Glenn.
How are you today?
I'm well, thanks.
Janice has been the Director of Clinics and Head Psychologist for the New York College of Allied Health, and in the course of doing that has supervised literally dozens of coaches and psychotherapists, has come to think of herself as the coach's coach. And I thought she'd be a particularly interesting person to interview about her experience in life coaching and what she's observed about the struggles that new life coaches go through and the struggles that more experienced life coaches go through because of her unique experience and training. I know Jan's level of dedication and passion for the field, so I thought she'd be terrific, and I think we're very lucky to have her here.
Thank you, Glenn. That's a lovely introduction.
Jan, why don't you tell me how you first got started in life coaching? When did it first come to your attention? And I know you were a psychologist before you were a life coach.
Yes, that's true. And thinking about coming to the path of life coaching, I can't say so much that I chose it as that it chose me. As people were working with me and we were working in my practice, people's needs and growth orientation really started to dictate that we start to look at life management issues, business management issues, finance management issues, things that are very growth-oriented and very practical, which when I began to look at it, really was bringing me farther and farther outside the bounds of what might be considered traditional psychotherapy.
Sure.
And when we began to do that, and as my patients got weller, a word that I like to use in my practice is they got weller, these were the issues that continued to come up. Their symptoms would get better, and instead of working on particular psychodiagnostic symptoms, we were now working on growth. And that's really when I embraced the coaching model.
So it has more to do with moving away from psychopathology and trying to restore normality like you might do in the medical model, and you became more enamored with getting people as well as they could be. And I think,
yes,
if I understand what you're saying by that, when you say the word weller, I think you mean to bring people to an above-average level of wellness, do you?
Yes, that is what I mean, that all of us try to cope with life, and we sort of see that life can be extremely challenging. But when we master a particular skill set in coping with life and the stresses, the regular stresses and struggles that life is going to present, we master those and ruling out any kind of current catastrophic life circumstances. Then there's this realm of being able to really have mastery in the world that goes beyond just sort of reacting to what life throws you and being very proactive about how you want to go out and encounter life. And that's, I think, where the realm of coaching really comes into play. The other thing I wanted to mention, Glenn, you had mentioned my background. When I worked at the New York College, I was working with many, many professionals at the college. These were nurses, professionals in their field, acupuncturists, chiropractors, educators, as well as students who were coming to the program to learn various fields of allied health. And these folks were coming to me with very specific questions, concerns about how to run their own practices, how to run their lives and their own practices, and I very naturally became involved in counseling them and coaching them about how to set up some very basic parameters of coaching of their own practice, things like fee setting and boundary issues and managing the practice relationship, and all of those things also became kind of a natural forum for ongoing work as a coach.
Would it be okay if we went into some of those in a little more detail and some of the experiences?
Sure.
Because I think it would be interesting to my listeners to understand the ways that fee setting and boundary issues, some of those practice management concerns were presented to you.
Great. And I think, again, Glenn, especially for your listeners who have some psychotherapy background, we all understand how important it is to create a secure environment. All of us are looking to feel that we're able to trust who we're working with and that we have some security about the parameters of the relationship. That's very important, no matter who we're working with. And a lot of times these things aren't spoken or they're not identified, but we all know that they're important. It has to do with the give and take of a relationship, what we might consider the contract of the relationship. So the kinds of things that people would be struggling with time and time again were some very basic contractual or structural parameters of the client-practitioner relationship. And that might be, how do I establish a consistent schedule, a consistent time frame that will work for the client and myself? How do I establish some basic rules about, does the client have to show up? And if they're not going to show up, do they have to call me and cancel? When do they need to do that? Some very basic things. Do they have to pay? One of the things that I ran into, and I think we all can understand, is that we are helping professionals. We want to help. So when people come to us and want to be helped, we do that quite naturally. And money is not always, probably not often, the first concern.
Right.
And yet we have to pay the bills. See, I used to like to say we don't live in a society where people are going to drop off a chicken on our doorstep. If we help them, that, the electric company is going to send us a bill and our rent is going to come due. So we must collect fees. And that clients can feel very settled and secure if they understand what the expectations are, what they're expected to do regarding fees. If they're given instructions about how to do that, if it's set up in a way that's very safe and yet very clear. And then you can move on from that. Oh, also, basic things like phone policies. How can the client get a hold of me? When is it okay for them to call? Do I have it set up so that they can call all the time and they have an understanding of when I'm going to be calling them back? Those very basic things. And then from there, that's your very stable platform or foundation on which you can build the rest of the coaching relationship.
I think what's so important about what you're saying is that I've heard many people new to the field approach these issues with a sense of guilt, as if they feel that, maybe because we are helping professionals, that they wish that they didn't have to charge and they didn't have to set these boundaries and phone policies. And what I really like about the way that you're saying it is that it makes it clear that these are part of what creates a secure environment for the client.
Exactly. They're essential. And often what will happen when mix-ups come up down the road, and again, in terms of issues of liability, malpractice, those are hot topics in psychotherapy. I don't believe so much in the coaching business.
People are concerned.
Okay.
Sure.
So when you think about what makes people want to sue you, it's usually because the relationship has gone sour in some way. There's been a miscommunication, a lack of communication where a person feels injured, misunderstood, somehow miscommunicated with. And all of those things are extremely important, again, for creating a stable working environment where you really are building in risk management as well.
Gotcha.
The other thing that I want to say, Glenn, that came to mind is that, people really do believe that you get what you pay for. We really do believe this. And in fact, I was thinking and getting ready for our talk today, some of the common mistakes I made, the mistakes that I think that new coaches make, and that is in undervaluing their service. Going beyond that, not really understanding the marketing process. Psychology dictates about how they value services that they pay for. And we really do believe that we get what we pay for. So if we tend to undervalue or discount our services, our clients might expect that they're getting something less than professional.
Yes, absolutely. And what can also happen is that if you're in the range that people might spend a simple dinner out or going to the movies or something like that, then they don't take it as seriously. So even if they might really like a movie that they went to, but they're not going to put a lot of time into preparing for that movie and processing the movie afterwards and thinking about how that movie will impact their life.
Exactly right.
I think that's why Jay Abraham, who's one of my favorite marketing mentors, says that he wouldn't necessarily charge $5,000 an hour if people would actually do what he said at a lower price, but he decided to position himself as the world's most expensive marketing consultant because people took him very seriously.
That's exactly it.
It becomes an event in their life, in their week. Switching back to the coaching model now, it becomes an event that they prepare for and allow to have an impact on them, and it works out in everyone's best interest.
Glenn, that's exactly right, and that brought up another thought, which is that as we begin to develop our clients, we mentor them. We are their mentors, and they look to us, for example, and what we know from psychology is that people learn best from models. They learn best from the people that they see doing what it is that they want to do. So as coaches, if we value ourselves appropriately, we are teaching in a very direct way to our clients how to value themselves out in the world. There's no better teacher than that.
Totally agree. Let me throw you a curveball about that, though, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Because there's kind of a paradox and a balance I'm always trying to achieve if I talk to a coach and try to help them to work this out with their fee. In the beginning, for a new coach, it's always seemed to me that there's no substitute for experience.
Absolutely.
The more clients that they can have, the more sessions that they can do, the more stories get inside of them, the more they feel confident in any situation. And sometimes they don't have the skills up front to go in and charge $200 per session. And it can prevent them from getting the experience that they need to develop those skills. Yet if they were to establish a lower fee, then they run the risk of people not taking them as seriously. And I'd be curious, if you don't mind, how you might recommend that people work that out.
Well, that's a very important area, Glenn, because, as you said, people have to get a certain number of stories inside of themselves as an experience base, a sort of data file inside of themselves so that they can go back to that and rely on that in new situations, and that builds confidence as a professional. And also, we do kind of understand, the public kind of understands, and we understand as professionals that there's a learning curve, there's an entree level into a profession, and then there's a master level in a profession. And kind of like to say, you're going to end up kissing a lot of frogs as you develop your practice. You are going to have a lot of experiences where you're really paying your dues, so to speak. I certainly started out this way. The best coaches that I know started out this way. And it's one of the things I recommend a new life coach to do immediately if they want to get started in the business, which is to give away some of your service, volunteer some of your service, offer to do what you're going to do at an entry-level fee, or sometimes a first consultation for no fee.
Just so that you can have the
just
experience.
So you can have the experience,
But
really.
what you really need to avoid is setting up a contract where the person is going to expect that that fee will continue for a long period of time.
That's exactly it.
There's a big difference between having a sample session or half a dozen sessions or something at very, very low fee.
That's right.
And there'll be a proportion of people who might come in and were reluctant to work with you, but because you're offering them $50 or $25 or whatever, they'll give it a shot, but you make it clear up front that your normal fee is $200 or whatever your normal fee is.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And to know what's reasonable in the field and what other people are charging and are being paid. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then I think the other aspect of that is making an assessment of your client on a client-by-client basis, because I think that there always needs to be a perceived value to payment ratio so that the client feels that they're getting something more than they're actually paying for. And it's been very important in your experience to help new coaches to set up the parameters of a secure contract to create a safe environment for the client. And do you remember in your early experience, and I guess your early experiences were more with psychotherapy patients than with life coaching clients, do you remember the difficulties that you went through in learning how to set that up yourself?
Oh, sure. Feeling very isolated. Feeling that it was me and my patient in a room. Remember the feeling of driving a car the first time when you've gotten your license but you're not a very experienced driver?
Sure.
And that is the feeling. I can remember that first time I drove by myself, and I can remember those early sessions when it was myself and the patient at that time in a room. So much of those early days were caught up in really paying more attention to myself and my anxiety level, or how did I feel? Did I feel comfortable? Was I feeling like I was doing okay? And I wasn't able to all that well focus on the person that I was sitting in a room with. So that's another good reason why you need to try and get as much experience as you can. But of course, the mistake I made at that time is I thought I was alone. And what I did as soon as I could kind of organize myself about it was get a supervisor.
Sure.
And that really made all the difference.
Sure. It helped you to step outside of yourself, right?
Yes. You're asking great questions, Glenn.
Thank you. One of the most frustrating experiences, I think, for not only new coaches, but throughout the experience continuum, is when someone believes that they're doing a good job with a client and they're enjoying the work and the client is actually making progress, and then the client wants to leave. And people say dirty words about coaches and psychotherapists about how we don't let people leave, but it seems that no matter what we do, that at some point we come up against someplace that the client doesn't really want to go. In my experience, part of what distinguishes a really good coach from an inadequate coach is their ability to help the client to move forward despite themselves. I'm wondering if you might talk a little bit about the various situations that you've observed coaches to go through with clients when they're trying to take the clients to the next level. Some people that have lost those clients, some people that have kept those clients, and what you think the difference is.
Okay. I'll try and speak to that. I think that, as you said, in psychotherapy, we might be a little bit more prepared for the fact of it. I don't know that we're all that better able to deal with it unless we're really well trained, but we sort of expect that people will reach a point in their treatment where they're not going to want to go forward, as you said. In coaching, it's a little more challenging because, especially if we've been helpful, people might really feel like they're doing pretty well, they're doing well enough, or they reach an area where they get a surprise. They weren't expecting to come up against what we would call in psychotherapy a resistance. They weren't expecting to come up against a particular obstacle, but here it is, and they don't necessarily want to go forward. So, for example, if someone's got a real fear of public speaking, which we know is pretty common. But
it's something that I'm exhibiting a little bit right now.
But in order for, very natural, in order for them to go forward, they're going to have to speak in public in some way. That could be as simple as networking. It could be as simple as getting on the phone and making a few calls and talking to people about what they do. And it could be getting up and making a presentation in front of their corporation. The scare that they may feel inside of them may be enough to say, that's as far as I can go. Or part of them needing to work well and go forward might mean encountering work with other people that makes them extremely uncomfortable.
Sure.
And yet in order to go forward, they're going to have to get along with these other people or at least try and understand them. So part of what a really good coach needs to do is normalize the experience. The strongest feeling a person has when they're having one of these reluctances is that it's something inside of them. There's something wrong with them. There's something abnormal. And that in and of itself, the embarrassment about that or what comes up for them about that, they don't want to go forward. They feel that it's something unusual. So if the coach can normalize it, help the person understand that these are very, very normal, rational feelings to a situation. Again, one of the things that we know about psychotherapy is that it tends to pathologize a lot of things. And coaching as a growth model really helps people to understand what's adaptive about their behavior.
So what would it look like to normalize someone who was frightened of public speaking? Normalize those feelings?
Well, you help them to understand that there are really good reasons inside all of us that we don't necessarily want to be exposed. That just like it makes sense in many ways to feel afraid of being in an airplane or be afraid of being in a confined space, it makes sense not to want to feel exposed. That makes perfect sense. That there's logical and rational reason for that, and that in addition to whatever else there might be from the person's individual history, there's lots of good reasons not to want to do that and to feel anxious about it or uncomfortable. And you can talk about that. You can help them to also understand. One of the things, again, about that I like to use as much as possible when I work in coaching is to present approachable or easily identifiable models that people can relate to. So if I can let a person know that somebody they really admire has a tremendous fear about public speaking or whatever it is that they happen to be afraid of,
I see.
That, I think, makes them feel much more settled. That if this person can do it who they understand, or especially even myself, I think something that coaching allows us to do that psychotherapy doesn't permit us as much is the use of personal experience and personal revelation to our clients. That if I struggle with something and they've already seen that I can go out there and do it.
You can tell a story.
I can tell a story about it. And I can also tell them what I used to help me negotiate it, to get over it. Been wonderful coaches and psychotherapists who were also very much coaches who use that all the time. Milton Erickson is someone who comes to mind.
Gotcha. Now I feel more normal about it.
You're a wonderful coach and playing, Glenn.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, the other thing, Glenn, in terms of overcoming some of these obstacles and hurdles, I find that if I tell a client that something they are really struggling with is easy for me to help them with, not that it was easy for me to conquer, but that it's easy for me to help them with, instilling the confidence in the client that I can help them, that I've helped other people, that I've been there, done it, helped people, that I've got a fantastic success rate. I find that often pushes someone right into the next level, that they've been worrying not only are they unusual, but that they can't be helped.
And it's also so antithetical to the stereotype of coaches and psychotherapists, in the public, that people think we're all about covering our butts. Well, I don't really know. What do you think? And,
exactly.
What would your mother say?
Exactly.
that kind of, when we respond with confidence and security, that we've got the broader perspective and we know where this can lead to. And then I think that's one of the things that can really move people beyond where they've been before.
I agree.
Jen, I observe that one of the absolute hardest things for people new in the field is that they're not really prepared for the concept of induced feelings or the fact that feelings are so contagious when you spend time concentrating and talking intimately with people. And they don't realize that sometimes when they're feeling the worst, they're actually doing the best because they're helping their clients to think and feel things that they've never thought and felt before and that they might not be comfortable with. And that if they're going to make an empathic connection with the client at those times, that they have to feel that also.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you've experienced similar things where your coaching supervisees have suffered crises of self-confidence or self-esteem because they've misidentified that, and maybe you could give some dimension to that, or if you feel otherwise, then...
Yes, no, absolutely, Glenn. What you're saying is absolutely so. And I'm thinking again about my practitioners who I was also coaching, and they would very frequently present, and what's so interesting, Glenn, I think it's also the nature of our profession, the nature of our personalities that draw us to this profession, that we are usually presenting people that we're struggling with. When we present in this coaching supervision and our therapy supervision, we're presenting the people who we're having the hardest times with. So the people that we're doing really well with, I've actually had to remind my coaching supervisees, let's look at all your success stories first. Let's look at what's going really well here before we get into the harder issues, the clients who are making us feel possibly bad about ourselves or inadequate in some way. What we would need to look at first and foremost is a very basic concept, and this is a concept that became labeled in psychotherapy and became really well studied and researched in psychotherapy, but it's a concept that goes across every discipline. Everybody's familiar with it, everybody's aware of it, and it's called transfer of learning. Now, in psychotherapy, it's called transference, but when I teach about it, when I teach coaches about it, I call it transfer of learning, and it's a very basic, hardwired human function, which is that, and you can't see me, but I'm going to hold up a pen right now, okay?
Okay.
I'm holding up a pen, and we all know what a pen looks like, and it looks like a pen that all of us might expect. If you pull on the top of it, the top comes off, it's got kind of a point to it, and so I would expect, if I just walked into a room and saw this on a table, I would really expect the first time that I saw it that I could pull off the top as I'm doing, turn it over so that the pointier part is facing down, and if I have a piece of something in front of me that's appropriate, or if I were my 3-year-old daughter, the table would be just fine, I would start moving my hand, and I would expect that I could write. I would expect that marks would come out on the paper, and I could use this instrument to write with. And the beauty of that, it's called transfer of learning, and that we're hardwired to do it. See, I don't have to keep relearning that anything that looks like this, whether it's red or blue or gray or wider or narrower, you get the idea. Anything that looks like this is still going to function as a pen. Then I've saved a whole lot of time. I don't have to keep relearning, what we call reinventing the wheel. Same thing with a chair or a table or all the basic things in our objects in our environment.
Sure.
It's elegant and it's beautiful and it's adaptive, and thank goodness we can do that. The problem is that we also do that with people. We have a transfer of learning effect with people. So if I walk into a room and I see a person who looks a particular way, let's say they look like my first grade teacher, and I had a great experience with my first grade teacher, and everybody who reminds me of my first grade teacher I feel very positively towards, then we call that a really positive transfer of learning or a positive transference. And let's say I'm a coach now, and someone's walking in, and I just happen to remind them of a very positive figure in their environment. I've hit the jackpot. I'm way ahead of the game, because that person coming into me is predisposed to like me.
And to cooperate.
And to cooperate, exactly. However, it's not always that simple, as we can all remember. We didn't all have the best first grade teachers. If they have a negative experience, they're also going to transfer that transfer of learning, and it's much less likely that they're going to feel open to cooperation. And then we can call this transfer of learning, another way to think about it is a blueprint. And unfortunately, our minds are the most plastic and receptive to these blueprints when we're very, very little. So when we're 3 years old, which is when we have the most plasticity, the people who make the biggest impact on us also are people with a lot of power. Mom and dad, our earliest teachers and caregivers, people like that in the community, doctors. You could think of all those applications. Now, in our grown-up days, even though people are walking into our office and look a lot like grown-ups, we still know they have a lot of childlike feelings inside and predispositions because of this transfer of learning, a pen is a pen is a pen, to see people in the same kind of way. So part of what we're going to have to undo at some point with people that we coach are whatever their particular mix-ups or transfers of learning are with us. That's where we end up getting a lot of feelings put inside of us that don't necessarily belong to us. And one of the hallmarks of that, if a person that I'm supervising says, you know, I'm a really nice person, but this person always makes me feel like a real creep, that's how I have to educate them. These are feelings that are being put inside of you. That's not you. It's being put inside of you by the person you're coaching. We have to try and understand that, what that represents to them. In these ways, Glenn, that's where an experienced supervisor is essential, because by the very nature of the relationship, we can't stand outside and observe it all that easily.
Right.
So someone who's outside the situation can help us to reflect on what's going on. It's a very challenging area, and yet also very exciting, because if you understand what your client can transfer onto you, you can use that as leverage. That becomes your leverage for cooperation. And you can use that very dynamically by understanding who the most positive influences in their lives were. and also the most negative.
Jen, by the way, I have to say that this is, if not the best, it's one of the best explanations of transference in a very clear and sharp analogy.
Thanks,
but I think anybody could relate to that. Really, I mean that. It's very good. I wanted to add something to that if I could.
Please.
And what I wanted to add was that when people think about transfer of learning or transference, it probably conjures up with Sigmund Freud sitting behind a couch and interpreting to people, well, the reason you do this is because your mother said this and your father had a beard and wanted to marry your mother and kill your father.
Yeah.
That's not really what you're talking about.
That's right.
The difference between professional coaching environment or even the psychology environment and what people get in their everyday life, because people are transferring their learning all over the place, the difference is that as professionals, we hold those transfers of learnings and we consider them and think about the best way and the best time to use that information, and sometimes that's direct, but more often than not it's not direct.
Yes.
That's one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most facilitative aspects of professional relationship. That's what they get that they don't get anywhere else.
Exactly.
It's also why, as a coach, you wind up with that confusion and the intense feelings that you don't know where they came from, because you're not doing what you would do in your everyday life, which is to react and get those feelings out of you, because there's no reason for you to hold all these negative aspects of it anyway.
Exactly.
And it's the negative transfer of learning that's more destructive and prevents people from accomplishing what they really want to accomplish in their life.
Yes, there are clients who, in a very funny way, because you'd like to say, look, you're paying me. I didn't call you to come and be coached by me. They really try to undo your efforts. That's the most confusing picture of all, someone who's coming to us to try to do better in their lives, and yet they're very systematically sabotaging themselves or sabotaging the work.
Right. Your particular vehicle for helping coaches get through that is to explore the feelings that were induced in them in the sessions that they had. Why don't you say a little more about your process for helping coaches deal with the things that are transferred to them?
Well, I very much try to get them to say what was going on for them as best they can, again, because a lot of this is difficult to articulate, but as best they can, what's going on for them, what feelings are being induced, what are they feeling in the session, are they taking this client with them, are they thinking about the client a lot of the time, are they working really, really, really hard for the client and the client doesn't seem to be working as hard. There are some typical markers or red flags about when feelings are really being strongly induced in a coach. So first of all, there's an educational component, how to teach our coaches about induced feelings and why are they uncomfortable, and identifying the ways in which they are uncomfortable, because a lot of times coaches don't know that it's not appropriate necessarily to bring a client home with them and really, 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 really spend a lot of time on trying to do the right thing for this particular client. So part of it is helping the coach to identify if indeed they are having one of these struggles and these transfers of learning. If a coach knows that they're uncomfortable, part of it is exploring the ways in which they're uncomfortable, and also encourage, coaches are extremely creative, motivated people. So a lot of the time they have some ideas about how this relates to their own history, their own experience of maybe they always had to be a pleasing person, maybe they always had to try the hardest in their family, maybe they never felt good enough. Those kinds of themes can be easily identifiable with people who are really motivated, as I find coaches to be. We try and identify the common themes, and then we look at strategies, very direct strategies, and how to confront certain induced feeling situations, how to confront them, and how to transition from kind of wherever people are stuck through to a new place. I don't know if that's very clear.
No, sure. Sure it is.
And I find in that way that, again, there's the educational component and looking at the themes that come up, and then looking at how to directly, although we did talk about working indirectly, I think there are lots of very direct avenues as well to work with these common experiences.
Would it help you if I gave you a very early experience as a psychotherapist?
Sure.
So that you could maybe give some more specific examples of what you would have been doing with me?
Yes.
Okay. When you were talking about the negative transference of learning and describing the difficulty that most people experience with that, the first person that popped into my head, and I'm going to disguise some of these details and change the name to protect the innocent, but basically when I was an intern, one of the first people assigned to me was a 400-pound Hell's Angel type person.
Oh boy.
Who came riding up to the hospital in
Good thing you're very tall, Glenn.
It's a good thing I'm very tall. Well, he still weighed twice as much as me, but he came riding up to the hospital on a motorcycle, and when I brought him into the office, closed the door, and he sat down, and I said, well, what brings you? And he looks at me and he says, well, college boy, I like to hurt people with my head. And I said, okay, well, we can talk about that. So you mean you like to play head games with people? And, and he says, no. And he pulls back the hair on his head, and he's got scars all across his head. And he says, no, I like to beat up people with my head, and I'm really good at it. And I beat up several police officers a few weeks ago, and they just let me out, and they insisted that I come here.
Uh-huh.
And it says, as a matter of fact, I'd like to beat you up with my head right now, college boy.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And that was probably my first and most representative experience with the negative transference, and people won't be experiencing that for the most part in a coaching practice.
Very direct, although you will have coaches who are working for larger companies and going in to do consultations with people who don't necessarily want to be coached. I can consider that could be a possibility under some circumstances.
Yeah.
And that's a great example, and unfortunate that you had to go through it, number one, but a great example of how it's very important to be able to screen for the appropriateness of candidates. And not everyone is going to be a coaching candidate. Let's face it.
Absolutely right.
Not everyone who comes to us is going to be a coaching candidate. And we could certainly say that this guy was not really a great therapy candidate, not necessarily lending himself to a whole lot of insight. So part of the experience for me, if you were my intern at that time, and certainly if a coach ever presented something in a similar vein, I would help them to understand that this person is not a great candidate for the work that the coach is there to do.
Sure.
And that really leads us into the idea of helping a coach to understand exactly what it is that they want to do, who they want to do it with, and in what situation. Because the joyful thing about working as a coach is that we are really trying to help people to become extremely self-actualized in their life, in a position of great autonomy, to be able to do what we want to do. So unless we really know what it is and feel okay about that it's all right for us to identify who we want to work with and what we want to get paid for it, what we want our lives to look like, and then we can go and achieve that. That's really the wonderfully exciting thing about coaching. I think that helps us to then attract individuals who we are more likely to do better with and who we're going to want to work with over time.
So your focus is on really helping your coach supervisee to self-actualize in their practice.
Yes.
So that they'll be able to help their clients to self-actualize.
In their lives. Yes, exactly. Well said.
And I suppose the other element of that is knowing when they're in over their head, when to refer to a psychotherapist or psychiatrist.
Yes.
Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yes, that one of the risks, especially a field like coaching, gets a lot of emigrants, as we might say, from psychotherapy profession. As a coach, suddenly we're comfortable enough sitting in a room with someone who may have a clinical depression, may be experiencing symptoms of anxiety, may have other things going on, maybe even physical conditions that lead to organic mental health kinds of issues. And because maybe we've come from a psychotherapy perspective, we're kind of comfortable with it. And we might be comfortable identifying it or possibly exploring it, but because we're working as a coach, we're not really there to treat it. So that's when it becomes exceptionally important to refer to someone. But again, I want to say it's certainly very important in the psychotherapy or psychiatric realm. There's a virtual universe of areas where we won't have the expertise, and the client at any particular moment is going to need somebody with that expertise. So it's as important to identify when a patient really requires a psychiatric referral as it is when they need a referral to a good attorney, when they need a referral to a wonderful financial advisor or consultant, that we must keep as part of our tools.
I think that's really important because when you put yourself in the position as life helper,
yes, people
will tend to accord to you great importance. If you're not careful about it, you can start to feel like you're the grand wizard.
Yes, true. It reminds me of the Wizard of Oz, and, he says, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
And that's what it would be if you took that position as the Grand Wizard.
Yes, exactly, because we can only be who we are, which is many times very fallible individuals. Somebody once told me, I was rehearsing for a radio program, and I was using a supervisor to coach me about doing the radio program, and he said, the only difference between the amateurs and the professionals is that when the professionals make a mistake, they just keep going right on. We all are going to make mistakes. The key is to understand that we're going to make them and know how to go on with the mistake and make the appropriate referral.
As we're starting to wind down, I'm wondering if you could give coaches 3 pieces of advice. New coaches, not necessarily psychotherapists becoming coaches, but life coaches, 3 pieces of advice that you wish that someone would have told you when you were starting out, what would they be?
The first one is to take a good marketing course, Glenn, because what I find, and I'm still doing this, in fact, this is one of the things that I'm studying right now, is that it's not that we don't work very hard. We work very, very, very hard. But most of us have not come from a sales and marketing background. And we really want to help people. But unless people know what our product is, we're not going to be able to use it. No one's going to know what we do. We can have the best product in the world, but if people don't know about it or aren't made to be curious about it, don't want to try it or don't know how to try it, we're going to be sitting home, lonely coaches.
I appreciate you saying that, and of course that's the reason that I'm putting this all together.
I think it's very important.
Thank you for the plug. But
very important, Glenn,
okay.
And it's really the truth because I've worked now in the field for 20-plus years. And I am only beginning to really realize the power of effective marketing from whatever that comes from in my history, not necessarily knowing how to do it, feeling confident about doing it, feeling confident about myself. It's really helped to leapfrog me over many, many levels.
Jen, could I say something about that?
Yes.
Because I think that people tend to think of it as a personal failing that they're not involved with marketing, and I don't see it like that. I think that it's positioned in the culture. Marketing and sales are positioned in the culture as if you are trying to convince people to buy something in your best interest against their best interest.
Yes, that's true.
You know, like a used car salesman, and virtually everybody strays away from it. The helping professions in particular. I don't know if it's something in your history or just that you're kind of emerging from the cultural biases that we all live with about marketing.
That makes a lot of sense.
But the way that I think about it, that really helped me to overcome those biases in myself. I come from a long family of psychologists, and I'm married to a marketing person, and so I had to confront this fairly early on. And the way I think about it is that psychotherapy, life coaching, are attempts to get people to act in their best interest using words, using talk, words and communication. And really, if you're engaged in ethical marketing, which means that you've got a product or service that's truly delivering value and more value than you're charging for it, then your marketing communication is actually an attempt to influence people in their best interest using words also. So it's kind of like doing coaching or psychotherapy on a broader scale to get your message out to the largest, most well-matched group of people. And the last thing I'll say about it, because I really want to focus more on the advice that you have, the last thing I'll say about it is that if you do have a valuable set of skills, if you are able to impact people's lives, then I actually think that the moral obligation is a reverse of what most people think. Whereas the cultural bias says that, you know, marketing is kind of evil and used car salesmen is like, but if you've got a valuable product, then you actually have an obligation to get out there with it because people will suffer if they don't know about it. It's not just that your practice will suffer or you won't make as much money as everybody else or as you should, but the world will suffer. Society won't benefit in the way that society should benefit from your efforts. So,
Glenn, that's so well said. It makes me feel much better. And I think you're exactly right that we've really been told a very different story, especially in the helping professions, about letting people know who we're all about. That's terrific.
Well, thank you. So back to you. What are the other 2 pieces of advice that you might have for new coaches?
As I said before, one of them would be to do as much to get yourself out there as you possibly can. So to take speaking engagements, to look for those opportunities, to give time away in order to let people know what you do. Network, write a column, something like that. Get yourself out there. I've gotten clients and patients from all of those venues that I mentioned, from speaking, from giving away service, from writing. I've gotten clients in every way. And the third thing I would say is to hire a good coach. Hire someone who's been there before, who can give you some techniques to help you to understand some of the tricks of the trade and to help you to feel settled. It's also a great referral source when you're working with a mentor and they have clients that they can't work with. They're very happy to pass them on. And it's a wonderful community of support. So join an organization or get a coach yourself.
Well, I would recommend that they consider calling you if you have time available.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you very much.
And would it be all right to give out your number in case they have interest?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And what's
Do you want me to do that now? Sure. It's 413-644-9827. 413-644-9827, and if anybody's calling in, they can leave a message at any time.
Terrific. Is there anything that I forgot to ask you that you wanted to add to the discussion?
Glenn, I think you're very thorough. I think we covered a lot of bases.
Well, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to do this. I found it very valuable and actually learned a bunch of things myself.
Glenn, it's always a great experience talking with you.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're back, and this is a postscript. As I was getting off the telephone with Jen, she reminded me that there was one other very important topic that I wanted to talk to her about, and that had to do with the transition from working a full-time job to being a life coach, and when do you make the jump, give up your income, and how do you go about that? And I know Jen had some very specific thoughts about that, so I wanted to come back on and give her the opportunity to say that.
Thanks, Glenn. I was thinking about that, and my experience with this was, I think, one that other people can take a look at, might be instructive in that I really had to be very creative in making the bridge. First of all, being confident that I could do it. People out there who are just starting their coaching practices, I really want to encourage you and stress to you that listen to positive, optimistic people who have also done this. And those are the people to pay attention to, because I certainly found that there were many, many people who said, oh, you'll never have a private practice. Who does that anymore? You're going to, very much naysayers. But those are the people that have a lot of negative transfers of learning in their life, and they don't tend to make great coaching clients either, but it is possible to do. And what I did, and I found out, and one of the things you may have to deal with is that your secure job might actually provide stepping stones into your work as a coach. That will provide some of the material for your early supervisory experiences, conflicts of interest, making sure that you're not in any conflict of interest with your day job while you're cultivating your coaching practice. But that being said, beginning to cultivate a clientele, being very creative with times that you have available. What I did at the beginning was I had saved my vacation time, I saved personal time, I saved flex time. And towards the end, when I really knew I was transitioning, I even took a regular half day off each week of personal time, prearranged, in order to see clients that couldn't be seen at night or on the weekends. At the beginning, it definitely requires a greater deal of sacrifice away from your family and things like that. But if you feel comfortable and confident, technology is so great now. When I was starting out, the internet was nothing. It didn't exist. Certainly there weren't webcams and web-based technology that enabled you to be directly in contact with a client without having to sit in a room with them. Working with international clients, you could be on different time zones. All of that works out very nicely. And being comfortable working on the phone. So you certainly can take time out of, kind of carve time out of other times at the beginning. And how I knew that I was ready was when it scaled for supply and demand, just tipped, and I had a regular, consistent clientele and not enough time to see them. So those are some thoughts that I wanted to share.
Yeah, that's really good. I don't know if everybody's aware that there's a technology that allows you to have telephone conversations over your computer, and you can actually have conversations overseas over your computer for no cost whatsoever.
Amazing. Fantastic.
So it really does open up a global market for you. And one thing that you can do using the internet to target your clients is to target telephone clients in another time zone, so that if you need a few hours after work and these people want to speak at a different time, it can be a different time where they are and work out for both of you.
And this is why I say to everyone who's listening, Glenn Livingston is one smart guy.
Stop.
One smart guy, and if you can work with him, if you can grab up everything he's got to offer, do it. It's worth twice as much as he's going to charge for it.
Well, thank you very much for your accolades.
Unsolicited.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. The last thing I wanted to say about that, I do have some more information about this in the audio newsletter and the system that I'm presenting, that it's worth charting. There are points in every coach's client pattern where the clients become more stable. And I find that it's different from coach to coach. I know that if I had a client who came for more than 7 sessions, they were very likely to come for at least a year. I know that when I had clients who'd be willing to work on the telephone, they were more likely to stick.
That's great. Very powerful.
I also know that approximately 50% of the people that would come for the first session, especially early on, later on when I had more experience, those numbers got better, but I would not get repeat sessions for about 50% of the people that would come for the first session. And I'll show you how to chart that.
That's a great tool, and I'm going to use that. That's a terrific tool.
You got it. Jen, say your number one last time as we get off the phone, please.
It's 413-644-9827.
Okay. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Glenn.
In just 12 weeks, you can become a certified professional coach. Confident in your ability and fully equipped to grow a thriving practice from anywhere or your money back. My name is Dr. Glenn Livingston, and I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about taking your coaching dreams a lot more seriously, about getting the right certification and training, and about developing the confidence to deliver stellar results time after time so your clients will accomplish their goals others will notice, and get referred back to you. I'll hope you forgive my modesty while we talk, because my wife and I have more combined experience in both coaching and business development than virtually any other program on the market. I've personally worked with over 1,000 clients and supervised dozens of coaches and therapists. Sharon's done literally thousands of groups and team-building workshops, and together we've sold more than $20 million in consulting. We've had our previous work, research, and theories covered in major media like the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Sun-Times, ABC and CBS Radio, the Wall Street Journal, New York Daily News, and many more. So we have the confidence in our ability to train and certify you as a coach and give you the know-how to build the practice of your dreams. In fact, we're so confident, we're willing to guarantee it right through the end of the very last class. If you don't feel our training was your best choice for any reason, just show us you attended at least 3/4 of the classes and did at least 75% of the assignments. We will refund every penny that you paid. When you compare our experience, guarantee, and more affordable than most pricing, we think your choice will be clear. But if you're like most coaches, you're probably a little skeptical, maybe a lot. You see a lot of limitations and obstacles, and I'd like to talk about them with you because most of them are self-imposed. For example, you might think it's not really possible to earn a living as a professional coach. Maybe you think there's too much competition. But did you know that as of this recording, there were only about 20,000 active coaches in North America? That's less than one coach for every 15,000 people. Of course, not every one of those 15,000 people is in the market for a coach, but coaching has become ever more acceptable and interesting thanks to reality shows like The Biggest Loser, The Voice, dancing shows, singing shows, et cetera, et cetera. Every one of the contestants gets a coach, and the audience gets to see the value firsthand as they progress. More importantly, most coaches ignore the immense value of niching. There's literally hundreds of coaching niches to choose from, and when you do niche, you dramatically lower your competition and raise your odds of success. For example, where there may be 20,000 active coaches overall in North America, how many adoption coaches do you think there are? What about coaches who specialize in chocolate addiction? By the way, I could use one of those. Family business, academic achievement, and you don't have to marry any of these niches either. You just try one on to size, learn the skills, and transfer them to whatever suits your fancy later on. But here's another self-imposed limitation. Many people think it's simply not possible to earn a living as a coach.
Well, you can visit becomearealcoach.com
to see detailed studies which suggest the average active coach earns about $55,000 per year. Of course, there are coaches who make a lot more and coaches who make a lot less. And it would be unreasonable to assume just getting certified will automatically give you this income. Your income as a coach will depend upon many things, including the niche you choose. For example, working with affluent couples to help them adopt is likely to be more lucrative than helping disabled veterans adjust to life at home. Not any more meaningful, fulfilling, or soulful, but definitely more profitable. The environment you work in will also influence your income. Private practice versus a salaried employee, etc. The number of hours you choose to fill. Nobody says you have to work full time. The fees that you're comfortable charging. There's a lot of coaches out there that don't want to charge as much as they really could charge. The business model that you choose, in other words, individual coaching versus selling books, tapes, seminars, groups, and events for more leveraged and passive income. The seriousness of the problem that you specialize in. How desperate are your clients to solve it? How meaningful and valuable is the solution? For example, it's easier to earn more as an adoption coach than a yoga coach for this very reason. And your income also depends upon how much effort you put into attracting clients. But most importantly, in our experience, your income is related to your coaching confidence and ability to produce stellar results for your clients. Or maybe the obstacle stopping you from taking your coaching dreams to the next level is wondering whether you need a professional background in therapy or counseling. But you don't, because coaching isn't therapy. So you won't get involved in diagnosing, treating, or curing any type of mental illness. And we'll teach you how to clearly draw the line and skillfully refer clients who require a licensed professional. When in doubt, refer it out is our motto. Coincidentally, many of these professionals who you refer to can become a good resource of referrals back into your network. Maybe you're not sure if you're worthy of coaching. Maybe you think you don't have enough experience, or you're just not credible enough to coach people professionally, or that you don't have the expertise. When people tell me this, I tell them that they're asking the wrong question. You see, if you're willing to put your heart and soul into helping someone, if you're willing to give them your undivided attention on a regular or semi-regular basis until they reach their goal, if you're willing to make them a priority in your life in exchange for a reasonable payment, then the real question is, you should be asking, are these clients worthy of me? Because you see, you've only got a limited amount of time, energy, and love to give these people, so you've got to protect your practice. The real question is, are they worthy of you? Maybe you don't think you have the time to become a certified professional coach, but if you can make 4 or 5 hours a week, which is under an hour a day, for just a few months, you can definitely become a certified professional coach in our program. And there are many, many ways to start a coaching practice on a part-time schedule. We know most coaches have very busy lives even before they begin. And because we actually like coaches who are out there living real lives, we work hard to accommodate them. Coaching is more about experience and the desire to share and spare than it is about book knowledge. Maybe you think you can't afford it. But our program is much more affordable than most other live interactive certification programs, and we've got financing options to suit any budget. Besides, coaching is one of the least expensive businesses to start because you can work with people all over the world via telephone, Skype, and the internet. So there's really no need for office space, rent, or other overhead. And we'll show you how to make a safe transition plan so you can carefully plan your move from another job with a great deal of confidence when the time is right. Because you are the product, this is another reason why coaching is easier to get into and less expensive, because you are the product, many of the traditional costs associated with starting a business like inventory or research and development, production cost, they just simply disappear. So, at the risk of appearing self-serving, a better question than, can you really afford to do this is, can you really afford not to do it? Finally, perhaps you think you're going to be a great coach, but you're too allergic to marketing to do anything about it. And if you feel this way, it's likely because you've been taught the wrong things about marketing. You're probably thinking of used car salesmen, cold calling, constant rejection, and constant lies. And nobody's taken the time to find out what marketing methods really suit your personality. Remember, Sharon and I have more combined experience in both coaching and business development than virtually any other certification program on the market. That means we've got the flexibility to help virtually any coach who wants it bad enough. You can check out our website at becomearealcoach.com for more details about our personal biographies. But for now, just trust me when I say if you don't like public speaking, there's no problem. If you hate making cold calls, there's no problem. If you can't even stand the idea of making a website, there's no problem because we'll show you how to market in a way that's comfortable for you. Now, by this point, you may actually be wondering what happens in the certification program itself. Again, you can visit becomearealcoach.com to read the details, but in a nutshell, our program is largely about the experience of being a coach and not the academic. Each week, you'll meet live with your instructor and your peers and have the experience of practicing that week's coaching or business development lesson with everybody in the group. You'll get detailed feedback from your master coach instructor, and you'll get additional feedback from your peers. And here's an important benefit most people don't think of. You'll get a chance to observe and learn from the other coaches in training. Then, after each event, you'll download a brief set of materials which prepare you for the following week and include an action challenge. So in short, first you practice with your peers, then you watch, read, or listen to us describe what you just experienced, and finally you do it on your own outside of class so you can integrate the learning. Practice, study, then do. It's really that simple in less than an hour a day. There's quite a bit more to know.
So you'll want to visit becomearealcoach.com as soon as you can.
But the most important thing to remember is that in just 12 weeks, you really can become a certified professional coach, confident in your ability, and fully equipped to grow a thriving practice from anywhere or your money back. Head on over to becomearealcoach.com now. Classes fill quickly, so please book your slot today if you're at all interested. Thanks.